right. Well, good morning, everybody. What a great, great way to start off our Sunday morning. This is such a powerful, powerful thing. Super excited, super glad you guys are here with us today. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and flip over to Luke chapter 5. That's where we're going to land. I'll catch up with you guys in a second. If you are new here, or if this is, maybe you weren't here last Sunday, we are right in the middle. This is week 2 of a series that we're doing that's called This is Church. And this whole series is built around this idea of culture, specifically church culture. And what we said last week, if you remember, culture is, in very just basic redneck terms, it's why we do the things we do. It's that undercurrent that drives the decisions we make in our lives. It's the thing that makes us follow into the strategies that we do, and it shapes the things that we do and the things that we invest in. And so one of the things that we said is we've been doing is we believe that as a new church, we're still very much a baby church. We've only been around a couple of years. We're still very much shaping our culture of who we are as Christ Community Church here in Camden. And so we think it's just really important for us to just stop and pause, if you are new here, to give you kind of a peek behind the curtains of what we think is very important to be a culture of. And if you have been with us for a while, this is just a great wet reminder of the things that we have been challenging guys with and encouraging guys with over the past 2 years. Now, the one thing we did say last week, if you remember, foundational to everything we do at this church, everything that we do is done to glorify God. That's why we make the decisions we make. That's why we sing the songs we sing. That's why we do the things we do. Ultimately, everything that we do is based on this one simple concept, this one simple idea, and it's to glorify God in all things. And what we do is we take that same thought, and then we start building culture around that. And if you were with us last week, you remember we talked about the first culture that we want to create as a church is to be a culture of one more. To just simply be a culture of just one more person. That's our heart, that's our goal. We have said that our goal has never been to pack this place out. We've never said we want to have a packed house. We've never said our goal is to put butts in every seat. That's not our goal. Our goal is to be about just one more person. And the reason for that is because we happen to serve a Savior who left the 99 behind for just one more person. And we have to be willing to do whatever it takes to get that one more person in our lives into the presence of Jesus. Like, that's our goal. We have to figure out who our one more is, and then we have to try everything we can to bring that person into the presence, into the likeness of who Jesus is. And that's our goal. And so we said this last week, that if you're going to do that, what that requires of us is a bold faith. Like, we have to develop in ourselves a bold faith that just says, no matter what, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to do everything I can to help bring you into the presence of God. And so this morning, we're going to look at another culture. It's going to be the culture of belonging. And in many ways, the culture of belonging is kind of an extension of the culture of one more. They're like two sides of the same coin. And so we're going to be talking a lot about this idea of what it means to be a church that's a culture of belonging. Because I hope you understand there's a difference between being a welcoming church and being a church where you belong. Those are two different things. You know, everybody has their own history with church. I was one of those. I was very blessed to grow up in church. My mom and my grandmother were very influential in my life, and from as early as I can remember, I grew up in church. I grew up in a small Southern Baptist church in South Georgia, and I can remember it was actually kind of cool because when I was really little, my mom would bring Fruit Loops and put them in a Ziploc bag, and I would sit there and munch on Fruit Loops while the preacher was preaching the whole time. And so it was kind of cool. That was my experience. So Sunday mornings, I'm eating my Fruit Loops. Sunday night, there's another message. I get to fall asleep in that one because it's kind of late. And then Wednesday night prayer meeting. And that was my routine for years. Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday evening, rinse, repeat, and just put that on cycle for a few years. That was my experience in church. And as I got older, I became very comfortable doing church. Like, I understood the rhythms of what church was all about. I understood when I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to do and the expectations of me while I was at church. I was very, very comfortable at doing church. But something happened to me probably about the time I would say 13 or 14 years old. One of my best friends invited me to his youth group. And I was like, okay, that sounds cool. I don't know what a youth group is because, I mean, I just hung out with a bunch of adults at church. That's all I did because it was a small church. Didn't have a youth group. And he's like, yeah, come with me to my youth group. I'm like, okay, that's cool. So we show up at his church on a Sunday night. And I'm like getting ready to walk into church. He's like, no, come around here. I'm like, what? He said, yeah. There was an entry into the basement. And this church had a massive basement, about the size of this room in here. And the entire space was dedicated to the youth. All of the teenagers, that was their space. You didn't find Christmas decorations or old, lawn equipment or anything like that. This was the youth space. And I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. I like this. We have our own space. And I walk in, and there's a table over here, and there's like stacks of pizza. And there's Mountain Dew. Like, there's pizza and Mountain Dew. Like, who can't beat that, right? This is awesome. I love church. This is awesome. I want to be here all the time. And then I look over in the corner, and there's Christian music playing, and contemporary Christian music, not like the old hymns. And I'm like, wait a minute, this sounds like the music I listen to, but the words are different. And I'm like, I kind of like this. I like this feel. And then you start looking at all the people in the room, and look, we had the biggest diverse group of youth in this room. I look around this room, and it was all these people from high school that I didn't really know that well. I was a freshman at this point in high school. There were a lot of people I didn't know, and we had every flavor of person you can imagine. We had jocks, we had cheerleaders, we had nerds, we had band geeks, we had stoners, we had in crowd, out crowd, you name it. We had rednecks, preppies, we had everything in this group. And I'm like, what in the world is this about? And so then the youth pastor gets up and he starts talking to us after we eat. And he's like, hey, now we can play some games. I'm like, okay, cool, I like games. And he had these organized games that he would get us all together and we would play, right? And I was that guy that was convinced that if I could somehow dominate these games, then all the cute cheerleaders would be so into me. And so that was my strategy. I just tried to dominate all these games. But there was this interesting thing when I started paying attention. I'm like, well, this is definitely a church thing. Like clearly, tomorrow morning at high school, it won't be the same. It'll be different. We'll go back to the way it always has been. And I remember that Monday morning, I'm walking into school, and I'm by my locker, and the star quarterback, who was a senior, now keep in mind, I'm a freshman, star senior walks past me. He goes, hey, Mike, and keeps on walking real casual. And I'm like, I'm sorry, was there another Mike? Was he talking to me? And my friends that weren't with me at youth group were standing there, and they're like, dude, you know Kent? I'm like, yeah, we're cool like that. We're friends. But that was my experience, and that just kept on going. All of these people that I did church with on Sunday mornings now suddenly knew me by name and were friends with me and acknowledged me in the hallways in front of everybody else, all the cool crowd. And I'm like, this is cool. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged in church. That was my first time I can remember feeling this sense of belonging. Because I hope you understand there is a difference in church between doing church and belonging and being the church. And the biggest difference between doing church and being church is creating a sense of belonging. Now, as happens, you graduate high school, go to college, get married, join the military. Jill and I are bouncing around, going to church after church. And look, we had some amazing churches that we attended. We had some great churches that were very welcoming to us. But for a long period of time, I never felt that sense of belonging that I felt when I was in the youth group. And then all of a sudden, fast forward like 20 years, and we end up in the Florida Keys. We're in South Florida, and we started going to Island Community Church, ICC. And we walk into it the first day, and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Contemporary music. It was actually in an old movie theater, so they had really comfy seats. I loved the worship pastor. He was awesome. And then I met this dude named Pete. And Pete didn't know me. He didn't know who I was. And so we just struck up a conversation. And then like the next week, Pete comes up to me again. He's like, hey, Mike. He's like, hey, do you like to fish? I'm like, yeah, of course I like to fish. You're in the Keys. You have to like to fish. That's part of it. He's like, well, how would you and your son Ben like to come join me and my son Kurt and go fishing this weekend in this mahi fishing tournament? And in my mind, I'm like, dude, you don't even know me. Like, you've met me one time, but you're inviting me and my son on your boat to go fishing? And he's like, yeah, come on, man, it'll be fun. I'm like, okay, yeah, awesome, let's go. So he got a couple of his buddies up, and his son and my son and all of us jumped on and we went fishing, and it was awesome. And in that moment, we began a friendship that has created a sense of belonging in me ever since. Like we were so connected in that church. Like Pete, I hope you understand, like what you don't know about Pete is there is a very strong argument. The fact that I am standing in front of you on this stage right now is because of Pete. And here's why. Because Pete was also a mentor to me. He's the one that encouraged me to get into seminary. He's the one that saw something in me. He saw God working something in me before I ever saw it myself. And he told me, Mike, he said, God's got some great things for you, man. You need to consider seminary. I really think it'd be right for you. And so in a large way, I'm here because of Pete. To this day, he is still one of my best friends. I don't get to talk to him near enough, but when I see him, it's awesome because he is like truly one of my closest friends. All because he started with creating a culture of belonging in the church that we were attending at the time. So if you're in Luke chapter 5, we're going to look at 6 verses, 27 through 32 today. And these 6 verses are going to give us incredible insight into what it means to create a culture of belonging within the church. This is Jesus. He's going to have this encounter with this dude named Levi. And what you got to understand about Levi, you don't see it in this particular story, but Levi in other stories we find out is actually Matthew. He begins to go by a different name. He goes by Matthew. And what we know is that after Jesus has this encounter with him, he calls calls Levi to follow him. And he does. And he becomes not just one of the disciples, but he's one of Jesus' closest apostles. And he goes on to write one of the gospels that we have in our Bibles today. All because Jesus created a culture of belonging when he engaged with him. That's the power of belonging. And so this story actually occurs on the heels of the story that we talked about last week. For those who were here, you remember we talked about the 4 friends that had their paralytic buddy that they were trying to get into the presence of Jesus, and they got to the door and there was no way they were getting in, so they climbed to the roof and they literally tore the roof off to lower their friend to be in the presence of Jesus. Well, after Jesus does this miracle in this moment, he walks out. And he walks down and he sees Levi. And that's where we pick up this story this morning. So let's start in verse 27. It says, after this is after the miracle in the house. It says, he, Jesus, went out and saw, underline that word saw. It says he saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at the tax booth. I want you to underline that phrase, sitting at the tax booth as well. Little context here, just so you know, tax collectors don't have the great reputation that they do today in our time, right? Back then, they were the worst. When I say they were the worst of the worst. I can't overemphasize that. These were the people, this was during a time when Rome had occupied Israel, and the tax collectors had pledged allegiance to the Roman Empire. They were actually collecting taxes from their fellow Israelites in order to feed into the coffers of the Roman Empire. And so in many ways, they had betrayed their fellow Israelites. They had betrayed their country, and actually in many ways, they had actually betrayed God. And so they are considered the worst of the worst of the worst at this time. In fact, oftentimes when you see them talked about in the Bible, you'll see them, they'll say tax collectors and sinners. Like they actually get their own category. They can't even lump them in with sinners. Sinners are over here. They're like the adulterers and the murderers are like, don't put me in that category with the tax collectors. We're better than that. Well, we might be sinners, but we're not them. That's how bad they were considered at this time. And it wasn't just that they were the worst of the worst. They knew it. Like they knew they were the worst of the worst. People treated them this way. They were isolated. The only people they actually got to hang out with were other tax collectors, because no one wanted to associate with them. No one wanted to be their friends. The crowds would shun them everywhere they would go. And so in this verse, I say that because there's 2 points here. 2 points I want us to understand. The first one is this. If we're going to create a culture of belonging, it means we actually have to see people. We actually have to see people. The passage tells us that Jesus saw him. Now, that word saw comes from the Greek word ethesiato, and it means to gaze upon or to stare at or to try to perceive. It's like when you're staring at something, you're trying to figure it out. That's what it means. So when it says that, Jesus, this is not some like little side glance and he keeps on going. No, it literally means that Jesus is staring at him. Jesus is staring at Levi. Have you ever had someone to like stare at you like unexpectedly? It's awkward, right? It is. Let's try it. I'm just going to stare at you. Like the whole message, I'm going to stare at you the whole time, right? Everything I'm going to do, I'm going to stare. It's just awkward, right? It's nerve-wracking to have someone unexpectedly stare at you for long periods of time. It just feels weird. And I think in this moment, that's exactly what Levi is feeling. He's sitting in his tax collector booth, he's counting his money, and then out walks this Jewish rabbi who's just staring at him. And look, Levi knows the crowds don't like him. They know that. He knows that these crowds hate him. And his assumption is that this Jewish rabbi doesn't like him either because he's a Jewish rabbi. But I imagine as Jesus begins to walk closer and closer to Levi, first off, he's getting more nervous and more nervous, right up until the point that Jesus is up close and personal and face to face with Levi. And Levi can see the warmth and the smile on Jesus' face, and he can hear the tenderness in his voice when he speaks to him. And I think he realizes at that moment that he doesn't just hate him. And see, I think for a lot of us, we kind of see Jesus and see God that way as well. Like the idea that God would somehow stop and peer into our lives might be a little bit unnerving. Like he's probably going to be disappointed or upset or angry with me, right up until the point that we begin to draw nearer to God. And when you are near to God, you see the mercy and the love and the grace that he pours out for you. And not that he hates you, not that he's angry with you, that he loves you. Now, I want to be clear when I talk about that we need to see people. I'm not telling you to physically stare at people. Understand that. That's weird, and that's what gets you on watch lists, so don't do that. But my point is, the point of this is that you can't see people from a distance. If you're going to create a culture of belonging, you cannot engage with people from a distance. You have to be up close and personal. It takes proximity. And you can't treat people like projects. You have to treat them like genuine people, and we have to really see them for who they are. We have to connect with them on a very personal level, and you have to get to know them and invest in their lives if you want to see them. That's how you see them, up close and personal, not from a distance. Second point of this verse is this. If we're going to create a culture of belonging, it begins by meeting people where they are. We have to meet people where they are. Levi was in a tax collector booth when this goes down. And Jesus does not wait for him to show up in the synagogue. He doesn't wait for him to show up at a church. He goes out to the tax collector booth and he meets him where he is. And I hope you know this, but 85% of Jesus' ministry actually occurs outside the temple and the synagogue. Only about 10 or 15% of Jesus' ministry is actually done in the church. Most of his ministry is done at homes, around tables, out in public, on roads. Because he's meeting people where they are, not waiting for them to show up and come in here. And look, we're going to do everything we can in this space to create a warm and a welcoming and encouraging environment for anybody that shows up. We really are. But it begins way before that. If we're going to be a church of belonging, we're going to create a culture of belonging, it has to begin before that, because most people who do not know God require a lot of different touch points and a lot of different connections before they will ever get to a place where they're comfortable stepping into a space like this. So we have to meet people where they are. The verse ends up saying, then Jesus, talking to Levi, says, come and follow me. Verse 28. Says, this is after he's called him to follow him. He says, and leaving everything. I want you to underline that phrase, leaving everything. It says, he rose and followed him. I told you about the church that I was in the Keys, ICC. The pastor at the time was a gentleman named Tony Hammond, a great guy. He was the most warm, tender, genuine dude I ever knew. And Tony was amazing. He'd been the pastor there for like 30 plus years at the time, and he was getting ready to retire. And Tony was one of these guys, like I knew the history of the church. The church had seen a lot of ups and downs, a lot of extreme highs, a lot of extreme lows, a lot of different things happening. But through it all, Tony had this quiet, like, peace about him. Like, he never got frustrated. He didn't get bitter. He didn't get angry at people. He just moved about his day. And I remember sitting there with him one time because I was one of those dudes. This was before I was in vocational ministry, and I remember I was still in the military, and I would see him one time, and I asked him, I was like, dude, how do you do it? I'm like, I love church if it weren't for all the people. Man, they get frustrating. And I'm like, how do you do it? How do you not get angry? How do you not get bitter? And true story, he looked at me and he said, every morning I wake up, I start by remembering how Jesus saved me. He says, every morning I wake up, I remember the salvation that I have in Jesus Christ. And when that's not enough, I remember what my life would have been like had he not saved me. So it's important that we know this, because if we're going to be about creating a culture of belonging, it's not easy. It's tiresome. It will wear you down from time to time, but that means it requires us to constantly remember the joy of our salvation. We have to latch on to the joy of our salvation. We have to remember that we too were once rescued. Every single one of us that calls ourselves a Christian, we were once rescued by Jesus, and now we're part of that rescue team, and we are called to go out and try to rescue other people. And we have to remember that if we're going to create a culture, we have to be keenly aware of our own salvation, and we have to be grateful for it. And in my opinion, I think that's exactly what Levi is experiencing in this moment. There is a radical change that happens in a moment in Levi's life. It's the same kind of radical change that allows him, that motivates him and propels him to leave everything at the tax booth and go follow Jesus. Like, he leaves all of his money, he leaves his briefcase, he leaves his laptop, all of that stuff gets left there at the tax booth, and he follows after him because he was acutely aware at that moment of what God had just done in his life, and he was keenly aware of his salvation. That's why he was willing to leave everything. Verse 29 goes on. It says, "And Levi made a great feast in his house, and there was a large company of tax collectors and others reclining at the table with him." So what's the first thing Levi does after he gets saved and he decides to follow Jesus? He invites him back to his house and they throw a party, right? But why does he do that? Because he doesn't know anything else to do. That's just his thought process. I mean, he's never been part of a discipleship group. He's never been in a life group. Didn't spend a lot of time in church. He doesn't understand ministry strategy or anything like that. So here's what he does. He's just like, man, I'm just going to celebrate this change in my life, and I'm going to bring my new Jesus friends into my house, and I'm going to let them hang out with my old friends, and I just hope something happens in their engagement together. Like, maybe Jesus will do in their lives what he's already done in my life. He just creates an environment. And the point here is that we have to create environments where we are with people. We have to be willing to put ourselves in environments where we are with people. And I'm talking about not Sunday mornings. I'm talking about outside of Sunday morning worship. In the community, in our towns, we have to be willing to put ourselves in environments where we can foster and cultivate and build these relationships with other people. And if you're not sure what to do in that moment, just do what you like to do. And then just do that with people who don't know Jesus. Like, I have two hobbies. I love to fish and I love to play golf. And with my job, I do not get to do those that often. So when I get the opportunity to go play golf and share Jesus with someone who doesn't know Jesus, that's like killing two birds with one stone, man. Like, that's the thing for me. Like, I'm gladly do that. And we all love these stories of dramatic, like, insta conversions. You know what I'm saying? Like we love the story of that person who walks into church half drunk and then he gives his life to Christ and then it's just he's off. We love those stories, and those things do happen. But more times than not, what it takes is small investments over time, weeks, months, years at a time, of us investing in people so that they can experience a life with Jesus. Our daughter, before she joined the Coast Guard, when she was still here, was actually at USC Sumter for a semester. And she made friends with several members on the men's tennis team down there. And it was a really cool story. There were three dudes particularly. There was a Catholic, a Muslim, and an atheist. It was like a bad joke starting. But there were three friends that she made. And she didn't invite them to church. No, she invited them to a young adults life group. And they were like, well, we got nothing to do on Thursday night, and it's free food. Sure, why not? And so for the course of that entire semester, she would literally go pick them up, take them to this, let them hang out with other 20-something-year-olds, and they loved it. They had a ball, and they absolutely loved that experience. And then at the end of the semester, they kind of all went their separate ways, and she stayed in contact with them. And a year later from that, she found out both the Muslim and the atheist had surrendered their life to Christ. The Muslim had decided he had to actually leave his family because he had converted to Christianity. And he was at a Christian church in Texas to this day worshiping God. Not because of something happened in a moment, but because she was willing to invest weeks, months, sometimes even years in the lives of the people around her. See, the thing about this is you don't have to be good about it. You don't have to be good. You just have to try. Like that's our thing. We don't have to be good. We just have to try. Because there's a big difference between inviting a lost person to church and inviting Karen to church. There's a difference between saying, I'm going to invite my neighbor to church and saying, I'm going to invite my neighbor Bob to church. We have to know people. These people that are far from God, we have to know who they are, and we have to get to know them on a personal level and connect with them. Slow, steady investment over time in environments where we can engage with people is the way. So the question this morning is, who's the person that you're investing in? Who's the person that's life you're changing right now? See, we could stop the story right here, and it would be an awesome story. It really would. But there's more. There's like 3 more verses. So let's keep going. Verse 30 says this, and the Pharisees. Okay, anytime you see a verse in the Bible that starts off, and the Pharisees, you know it's not going to be good, right? You know this is not going to go well for these guys. So it starts off, it says, and the Pharisees and their scribes grumbled at his disciples, saying, why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? Things are going well, then all of a sudden the religious dudes show up and they kind of tank everything the way they always do. And they're starting to attack Jesus, and they're attacking the disciples. Like, why is your rabbi hanging out with these dudes? Man, they're tax collectors. They're sinners, man. They're unclean. He shouldn't be over there hanging out with those people. Like, oh, by the way, we're the Pharisees. We're the righteous ones. Why is he having dinner with us? He should be hanging out with us, not those people over there. And the reason I share that is because if we're going to create a church of belonging, we cannot get distracted by the outside noise. There will be outside noise. If you are following after the things that Christ is having you do, if you are creating a culture of belonging, it's going to require you sometimes to hang out with some sketchy people. It's going to require you to hang out with some people that are nothing like you. You're going to hang out with some people that look different than you, that talk different than you, that act differently than you do. And when you do that, there are going to be those that are going to be critical of you for doing that. And sadly, some of those people are going to be in a church somewhere. There will be some of the most critical people will be other people in the church with you. But you can't get off mission. Look, this is the dirty, messy underbelly of ministry, investing in people's lives. Sunday morning is easy. Dude, Sunday morning is easy. We get up here, we sing some songs, we're all excited, we get some great coffee, we watch baptisms, we celebrate, we're all pumped up, like, we love that. The hard stuff happens when you walk out the door, when you start having to invest in the lives of other people. That's different, but that's the game changer, and that's the mission that we've been called to. So do not pay attention to the outside noise. Do not pay attention to the distractions. That junk's always going to be there. Don't let it get you off mission. I'll wrap up with the last 2 verses. Verse 31 and 32 says, and Jesus answered them, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but the sinners to repentance. Jesus did this with a very specific purpose in mind. He was very honest about it. He did not mince words. He was very clear. The reason he was hanging out with these people, the sick, the suffering, the lost, was because he was on a rescue mission. He was trying to bring them closer to God, to bring them into the family of God. Every single time he went and sat at the table with sinners, every single time he had a conversation with sinners, his purpose was to bring them into the family. And that's our calling too. That's our purpose. That's his will for our lives, that we will rescue the lost. And so if we're going to be a culture of belonging, we have to stay focused on that calling. We have to stay focused on the thing that he has called us to do, to be part of that rescue team and to rescue those who are lost. I'm going to wrap up this morning with a poem. I actually stole this from a guy named Jay Pathak. It was written by a guy named Sam Schumacher. You don't know who he is, it's okay. But I think this poem really summarizes exactly this idea of being a culture of belonging so well. So I'm just going to read this morning. It says this. It's called I Stand by the Door. It says this. I stand by the door. I neither go too far in nor too far out. This door is the most important door in the entire world. It's the door through which men walk to find God. There's no use me going inside and staring when there are so many people still on the outside. And they, as much as I, crave to know where the door is. And all that so many ever find is only a wall where the door ought to be. They creep along the wall like blind men, groping with outstretched hands, feeling for a door, knowing that there must be a door there, but they never find it. So I stand by the door. The most tremendous thing in the world is for men to find that door, the door that leads to God. The most important thing that any man can do is to take hold of just one of those blind, groping hands and put it on the latch that only clicks and opens to the man's own touch. Men die outside that door, as starving beggars die on a cold night in cruel cities in the dead of winter. They die for want of knowing what is right within their grasp. They live on the other side of it. Why? Because they have not found it. Nothing else matters compared to helping them find it and opening it and walking in and finding him. So I stand by the door. Go in, go all the way in, go all the way down into the cellars, go way up into the spacious attics, the vast roomy house, the house where God is. Go all the way in and call back to the rest of us how wonderful it is. Sometimes I take a deeper look in. Sometimes I venture just a little further in, but my place seems closer to the opening. So I stand by the door. There's a reason why I stand there. Some people, they get partway in and they become afraid, lest God and the zeal of his house devour them. These people feel a cosmic claustrophobia. They want to get out. They cry. They say, "Let me out." And people way inside only terrify them even more. Somebody must stand by the door to remind them that they are spoiled for the old life, that they have seen too much, one taste of God, and nothing but God will ever do again. Somebody must be watching for the frightened who will seek to sneak out all the same way they came in, to tell them how much better it is inside. The people too far in, they do not see how near these people are to leaving, preoccupied by the wonder of it all. Somebody must watch for those who have entered the door but would likely run away. So for them too, I stand by the door. I admire the people that go all the way in, but I wish they would not forget how it was before they got in, that they would be able to help people who have not yet even found the door, or the people who want to run away from God. You can go in too deeply. You can stay too long, and you can forget the people outside the door. As for me, I shall take my old accustomed place, near enough to God to hear him, to know he's there, but not so far from men that I can't hear them as well. And remember that they are here too. Where? Outside the door. Thousands of them, millions of them, but none so important to me than just one of them, 2 of them, 10 of them, whose hand I intend to put on that latch. So I shall stand by the door and wait for those who seek it. I'd rather be a doorkeeper, so I stand by the door. Friends, where are you standing today? If you're walking with Christ, are you so far in that you have forgot that you were once rescued too? And that we have been called to stand by the door and open that door for people on the outside? That's our place this morning. That's our calling, and that's our challenge. If we're going to be a church of belonging, we have to be willing to stand by the door this morning. Let me pray for us.